Sunny skies emerging for East Anglia in the southeast, 10 to 13 Celsius here, 8 to 10 where it's raining in the middle, and then something a little fresher for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, 8 or 9 Celsius with brighter skies and a few showers. Into Thursday night, and the cloud and rain very slowly edges east, so that by the end of the night it's into eastern England, eastern Scotland with snow over the Grampians. But clearer spells in western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Touch of frost possible in places, most places frost-free as we start off Friday. And it's another gloomy start, another damp start for many, but this time it's eastern Scotland, northeast England into the Midlands and the southeast, most affected by the cloud and rain. Brighter skies, but showers following into western parts and temperatures trending downwards. That downward trend continues on Saturday and Sunday, but for most it also turns drier and brighter.
I am Mark Dolan and I'm sitting in for Dan Wootton on Dan Wootton Tonight. And breaking news, 2,000 Ukrainian civilians are reported to have died since Vladimir Putin's invasion, according to the country's emergency service. Amid more scenes of devastation and destruction, shocking scenes will go live at 9:45 to courageous Ukrainians in the middle of a European war zone. Inna Sovzan, the former education minister who's schooling Russian invaders on what bravery really looks like by taking up arms to defend Kiev. And Ukrainian Eurovision contestants Kalush, who are determined to make Putin face the music. But first, in my big opinion, I'll explore how the gesture generation has proven totally impotent in providing any form of significant support to Ukraine. That's coming up. You won't want to miss it. Then I'll get the views of my amazing superstar panel tonight. Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, Conservative politician Sean Bailey, and political commentator Daisy McAndrew. Has the Ukraine crisis exposed Remainer hypocrisy over national pride? Spiked Online's chief political writer Brendan O'Neill explores in The Outsider at 10:20. As MPs gave a standing ovation for the Ukrainian ambassador in Parliament. Columnist extraordinaire and a man who's never sat on a fence in his life, Rod Liddle explores why some figures on both the left and the right appear to be on Team Putin. He's uncancelled at 10:04. As Camilla is moved to tears by Ukraine's plight and Charles makes the unusual step of speaking out against Russia, should the royals remain silent on international politics, even in this dramatic case? Royal author Robert Jobson weighs in on tonight's Crown Jewels. After they put the nation's children and commuters in London through hell, are unions destroying Britain? Former London Mayor Ken Livingstone goes head-to-head with Robert Olds, director of the Bruges Group, in the clash at 9:20. I'll get your views as well. Are the unions getting out of hand? Plus, do MPs deserve a pay rise as a cost of living crisis looms over ordinary Brits? And are danger to life alerts sent directly to your phone a vital innovation, or Project Fear made portable? We'll debate those topics and more in the Media Buzz at 10 and 10:30. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers throughout the show, and I will crown today's greatest Briton and union jackass before the end of the programme. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. The big guy's taking a well-deserved break. I'm Mark Dolan. Let's go.
Good evening, I'm Miranda Shunker with the top stories from the GB newsroom. More than 2,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since the start of the invasion. That's according to the emergency services there. Transport hubs, hospitals, children's nurseries and many homes have been destroyed. The World Health Organization fears an imminent shortage of oxygen, cancer medicines and insulin. But President Volodymyr Zelensky says resistance has been strong and believes Russia has lost close to 6,000 servicemen.
Just think about this figure, 6,000. To receive what? To receive Ukraine? It is impossible. It will not happen with rockets. It will not happen with bombs, tanks, any strikes. We are on our land, and there will be an international tribunal to prosecute them for the war against us.
Roman Abramovich says he's decided to sell Chelsea Football Club. The Russian billionaire who bought it in 2003 says he'll be setting up a charitable foundation for war victims of Ukraine, where the net proceeds of the sale will be donated. He will also not be asking for the £1.5 billion of loans he made to Chelsea to be repaid. It follows several days of speculation after the prospect of sanctions against Mr Abramovich were raised in Parliament. The UN has voted overwhelmingly to reprimand Russia over its invasion of Ukraine and demanded Moscow withdraw its troops. 141 countries supported the motion and 5 countries voted against it, including Russia, Syria and Belarus. Earlier in the Commons, Prime Minister Boris Johnson accused Vladimir Putin of committing war crimes in Ukraine.
Putin has gravely miscalculated. In his abhorrent assault on a sovereign nation, he has underestimated the extraordinary fortitude of the Ukrainian people and the unity and resolve of the free world in standing up to his barbarism.
Well, meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis continues to build. The UN's refugee agency says more than 874,000 people have now fled Ukraine to neighbouring countries since the conflict began. Poland has taken in almost 500,000. In other news, police say it's a miracle a 15-year-old girl who was shot at a bus stop in Liverpool has survived. Reports of gunfire in Toxteth were heard just after 5 p.m. yesterday. The girl was taken to hospital and remains in a stable condition. Merseyside police say a 21-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight with Mark Dolan.
Good evening. It's all about opinions, isn't it? In my view, Vladimir Putin is a twisted, evil and dangerous man whose invasion of a free, democratic European country must fail. But are you seriously telling me that the deeply confused Joe Biden is the right man to handle this situation? Someone who masterminded the devastating and botched Allied departure from Afghanistan? And someone who can't tell the difference between, wait for it, Ukraine and Iran? Take a look.
We stand with you. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
Amazing. This is a man who probably needs to be reminded at the start of every briefing that he's actually president. It's all about opinions. And in spite of Putin being an awful human being, full credit must go to old Vladimir for ending the pandemic. Remember the coronavirus pandemic? Have you heard a squeak about the virus since the invasion happened? Proof, if you needed it, that so much of the hysteria around COVID has been fueled by the media. No media, no pandemic. It made money and it filled column inches to pretend that COVID was Ebola or the bubonic plague. It wasn't. Because notwithstanding that COVID has been a nasty virus that has taken too many from us, it has been mild and non-fatal to most. A third, famously, had no symptoms at all. Act like you've got it. Remember that? But you wouldn't know any of those things, given that we've spent 2 years living under a narrative based around fear. And to be precise, it was a mono-narrative, where only one view could prevail. In terms of the pandemic, the mono-narrative was that we must have lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, masks, arrows in supermarkets, you name it, even though lockdowns, for example, had never been tried before. All of these extraordinarily damaging measures, which Johns Hopkins University in the States say may have prevented 0.2% of deaths, that's right, 0.2%, were pushed by the government, the opposition and most of my colleagues in the media. It was a mono-narrative. Don't take my word for it. Dr. Angelique Coetzee, the medic who discovered Omicron in South Africa, recently said the following. There has been a lot of pressure from European scientists who have said, please don't say it's a mild illness. In South Africa, it's a lighter disease. But in Europe, it has been a serious illness, which is what the politicians want me to say. Damning. She was attacked for calling Omicron mild. Why? Because it didn't fit, you guessed it, the mono-narrative. As it turns out, Omicron was milder than Delia Smith's recipe for chicken tikka masala, something I pointed out in November of last year. And Coetzee herself was baffled by our reaction to Omicron at the time. Turns out, Omicron was a massive Omicron and a load of Omicrap. We're seeing the same mono-narrative with the net zero agenda. Britain will basically be underwater a week next Tuesday, apparently. And we should all start eating bugs, rice cakes and Linda McCartney vegetarian sausages as a matter of urgency. And pay for a 20 grand boiler and sell both our kidneys to buy a Tesla. The mono-narrative is everywhere, a bit like Omicron, ironically. There is a mono-narrative about the NHS, that it cannot be criticised, and that the only solution for the health service is more money. God forbid that there should ever be a mono-narrative saying that a man can become a biological woman, but with attacks on our greatest living author, J.K. Rowling, you could argue it's already heading that way. The truth can always withstand scrutiny, challenge and debate. Lies and exaggeration cannot. Welcome to 2022. It's all about opinions. But the scary thing about the mono-narrative is it often means having an opinion foisted upon you, as with the South African Dr. Coetzee. But here's another example. Take a look at this. The star conductor of the Munich Philharmonic Orchestra, Valery Gergiev, has been sacked for not condemning Russia. Now, be clear, he hasn't defended Russia, he hasn't waved the Russian flag at a concert, or had a tattoo of Vladimir Putin inked onto his left buttock. He simply hasn't said anything, and he's been fired. It's one thing to get in trouble for what you've said. You know my views on cancel culture. I'm all about free speech, bring it on, the good, the bad and the ugly. But to lose your job for not saying something, that is compelled speech and takes us to a very dark place. A mono-narrative, a single view on any issue, is never a good thing, and we're in danger of having it in relation to the Ukraine conflict as well. Now, absolutely everyone at the moment, if you look at the press, everyone and anyone with a Russian surname is bad. Bizarrely, Apple have stopped selling iPhones in Russia, which is good news for the people of Moscow who can save a few £100 and buy a Samsung. I paid £1,000 for this thing. What was I thinking? Let's hope that case works. Look, it doesn't take an expert in geopolitics to view Russia as the bad guy for invading a free country. Absolutely. And the scenes are horrific and war crimes are playing out on our TV screens. But would it be so wrong to try to understand why this has happened so that it can be resolved and not happen again? Just as we perhaps should have done a bit more due diligence about old Saddam Hussein, especially when we were searching for those imaginary weapons of mass destruction and when we killed thousands of people and sowed the seeds of ISIS. The mono-narrative about Donald Trump is that he was all bad. That is the mono-narrative. His behaviour on January the 6th, inciting trouble in the US Capitol, was a disgrace. And I've always doubted his fitness for office. But he boosted the US economy, had a balanced attitude to COVID. He said, it is what it is, how right he was. He battled extreme political correctness, and he didn't start a single war. But that doesn't suit the mono-narrative, does it? It was Donald Trump, of whom I'm no big fan, although we both enjoy orange makeup, engaged with people like Vladimir Putin. Yes, he did. He reached out. And Kim Jong-un. Trump was the first American president to meet with a North Korean leader. Jaw, jaw, not war, war, as Churchill put it. The mono-narrative now allows no criticism of Joe Biden who couldn't run a bath for himself, let alone the free world. That the Democratic Party in America foisted this confused pensioner onto the free world is unforgivable. So, Trump bad, Biden good, pull the other one. Meanwhile, the armchair generals on Twitter have been calling for the enforcement of a no-fly zone over Ukraine. This has mainly been called for by virtue signalling types who were previously asking for lockdowns, which has cost the West trillions and diminished its power to now tackle this crisis. You need money to win wars and to defeat bad people, I'm afraid. So the way that you defeat your enemy is by understanding them. And that can't be done with the mono narrative. And let me help you with the no-fly zone idea. If the Allies stop aircraft flying over Ukraine, any Russian aircraft would be shot out of the sky, which would spark the biggest international conflict since 1945. Not a great idea. If this snowflake generation can't handle a largely mild respiratory virus, I think they'll struggle with nuclear war. But hey, it's all about opinions. And let's hear all of them, shall we? Now, what's happened to my phone? I'll look for that in a second. Let's get a reaction from my amazing panel tonight. Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, Conservative politician Sean Bailey, and political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Daisy, if I could start with you. What do you think about this idea that we've got a mono-narrative about the environment, about the coronavirus, and about Ukraine?
I think there's certainly some truth to it. I think there are loud and proud and brave voices who do go against, a lot of people on this channel, but also people on the left who go against, what the Labour Party would want or so on. I don't agree with everything you've said, so I don't agree that, for instance, the virus was completely benign. I do think that thousands of people died who wouldn't have died if it hadn't been for coronavirus. Now, lots of people say, only a few thousand who didn't have underlying causes. And you can get into all the data. But I think when it comes to a singular narrative, call me a Pollyanna, call me an optimist, I do think the tide is beginning to turn. I think people are beginning to see the danger of cancel culture or everybody having to have the same opinion. So I'm quite optimistic, but maybe that's because I hang out with people who enjoy free speech.
Yes, and long may that continue. Sean, what's your view on this?
I'm not as optimistic because I think what's happened now, we've become so sick of this mono-narrative. People are developing another narrative and there's a real clash. I sometimes think as a country, we've lost the ability to have nuanced, decent, detailed debates. What we do, we cancel people or we ridicule people for having a different opinion. And it's written large. If you look at the conflict now in the Ukraine, that mono-narrative means that we won't challenge the UN as to what they were doing beforehand,
yes,
NATO or even the EU. We should have found a way to prevent this from happening. But there's lots of people in Europe now, politicians, who will push that mono-narrative because they won't be challenged. But if you take it from 40,000 feet, the problem is increasingly in Western politics, we're at each other's throats. We don't know how to debate. And for me, the real pain is that it actually started in universities, the very place you should be able to have real, deep, meaningful debates. They're now pushed that to one side, and it means the next generation are not learning how to debate. And if you cannot talk to your opposition, you cannot come to a resolution.
Amanda, for years, the West have underinvested in the military, and certainly countries like Germany have made themselves dependent on Vladimir Putin's gas. So the problem is not only the guy in the Kremlin, is it? It's us too.
Mark, I have to say, this is the first time I've met you, so I'm going to be really nice.
Oh, crumbs. Don't make a habit of it.
I think that at the moment, as we hear that 2,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine, when they're being bombed to smithereens out there, I think there is only one narrative. I think it is a, what do you call it, a
mono-narrative.
Mono-narrative. I think there's a mono-narrative.
And it's against Putin, basically.
And it's against Putin. It actually doesn't matter. I had to write down because Sean, as we all know, but I did not, is a colonel of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers.
He's an honorary colonel.
So he is actually a former soldier. So he understands a lot about the history and all the rest of it. I don't give a damn about the history. All I care about is waking up every morning at 3 o'clock, turning on the news and seeing what atrocities have been committed by Putin. Nothing compared to what, obviously nothing compared to what the families out there are feeling.
Sure.
and the terror they're going through. There is a mono-narrative here. Putin is a monster who has waged war against a free country. And I just don't see anything around the edges.
Well, no, I agree with you. And I used the word evil as one of the first adjectives in my Big Opinion monologue. But
what
there's a background to
There's
it.
a way to stop it.
I don't care about the background.
You can't stop Putin through this mono-narrative. You've got to have other people, other political concerns, say what they would do instead, where they went wrong. Evil here is that it's come to this.
So
It's not historic. It's alive today.
But also the issue we have, Amanda, is that, and I hear everything you're saying about the horror, and I said that it plays out on our screens every day, and these are war crimes. But the answer is not a third world war, is it? And that's what happens if we have a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which is what the people who are horrified by what's happening are suggesting.
No one is
and I think they're mad.
No one is seriously suggesting that. It is.
Well, it was suggested to the Prime Minister at a press conference earlier today.
A woman,
a Ukrainian.
I know, but it does not matter. We understand that the conditions of NATO, we understand that we cannot go in there. We understand we cannot shoot down any Russian planes because that could trigger something really different. But I think, putting that aside, there is a mono-narrative that Putin is a monster who is killing kids and women.
Is it that simple? It's a monster, yes, but is it that
it's kind of that simple.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the more you look into what's going on, I actually think the more the mono-narrative, when it comes to Putin, is true. For instance, I just want to take issue with what you were saying about the orchestra, the Munich Philharmonic Orchestra, Valery Gergiev, or however you pronounce his name. Now, I completely agreed with you. When I first heard he'd been cancelled, because he refused to denounce Vladimir Putin, I thought, don't know how comfortable I am with that. I then looked into him. He's not just a musician who refused to parrot out a line. He is a very, very close friend of Vladimir Putin. He appeared in one of Vladimir Putin's election TV adverts. You know, this is a man who, if he was a businessman, he would be sanctioned. So I don't see anything wrong, actually, with him being sanctioned and not being allowed to perform.
Well, there are lots of people linked to Vladimir Putin, including Roman Abramovich. But, I mean, you're going to do is have a witch hunt against anybody that's ever shaken hands with Vladimir Putin or anyone with a Russian surname. And that's my concern about this.
No, it's not anyone with a Russian surname.
I'm also a bit worried about the impact on the economy of attacking all of these oligarchs.
This is the big thing. You cannot solve this problem unless you have a dialogue, and this mono-narrative may prevent that. Yes, we all agree Putin's on the wrong side of history. We all know he's done things wrong, but continually parking him in the corner will become a problem. Yeah. Somebody needs to talk to this man to stop this war.
Exactly. You need a strategy.
Should it be China?
No, it needs somebody here in Europe. He's not fighting with China. He's fighting here in Europe.
But China could be the peace. They could be the peace brokers.
OK, from a point of view of brokering something, yes. But ultimately, that solution needs to come from Europe because that's where the tension is.
And we're not going to just bash him on the head and like a whack-a-mole. He will just pop up again. So he does need to be given some wriggle room if we're to avoid something even more horrendous, which I very much doubt we are going to avoid.
Final thought, Amanda?
No, I just wanted to comment that I'm wearing, in solidarity with Zelensky, I'm wearing the khaki colour, not the blue and the yellow. Yeah. I've not been out of khaki. I just think this is my pathetic symbol of solidarity, apart from giving lots of money to the Daily Mail.
Well, of course.
Which has done an incredible... They've raised £2 million in a few days.
I saw that. An amazing campaign. The British people have already been so generous. Well, look, Amanda Platel is being nice to me, but it won't last.
It will not last.
As you'll find out in the next hour and 40 minutes. Coming up, as Charles speaks out against Russia and Camilla is moved to tears by Ukraine's plight, should the royals hide their emotions on international politics, even in this dramatic case? Royal author Robert Jobson weighs in on tonight's Crown Duels. But up next in the clash, after they put the nation's children and commuters in London through hell, are unions destroying Britain? Former London Mayor Ken Livingstone goes head-to-head with Robert Olds, director of the right-leaning Thatcherite Bruges Group. Of course, Thatcher broke the unions in the 80s. I also want to know what you think. Email me, mark@gbnews.uk, or tweet using the handle @GBNews. There's also a poll up there that you can vote in now, and you'll get the results after the break.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloudy and damp for most of us overnight, but the extensive cloud cover will keep it frost-free. Then some brighter weather emerges on Thursday, either side of a slow-moving weather front, which is crossing the country as we speak. Another one following behind, catching up with it. So generally a cloudy and damp zone associated with these fronts, and that is widespread during the evening and overnight, even reaching Orkney, not quite as far as Shetland for the time being. Some breaks in the cloud developing for East Anglia in the southeast and also for Northern Ireland behind the second weather front. But in between, a lot of cloud and the rain turning more persistent for Western Scotland, North Wales, as well as the southwest and South Wales as we start off Thursday. A frost-free start for most, temperatures 7 to 9 Celsius at the crack of dawn. Then these two weather fronts I mentioned, they squeeze together and bring one coherent band of cloud and outbreaks of rain through central parts of the country. Sunny skies emerging for East Anglia in the southeast, 10 to 13 Celsius here, 8 to 10 where it's raining in the middle, and then something a little fresher for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, 8 or 9 Celsius with brighter skies and a few showers. Into Thursday night, and the cloud and rain very slowly edges east, so that by the end of the night it's into eastern England, eastern Scotland with snow over the Grampians. But clearer spells in Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Touch of frost possible in places, most places frost-free as we start off Friday. And it's another gloomy start, another damp start for many, but this time it's eastern Scotland, northeast England into the Midlands and the southeast, most affected by the cloud and rain. Brighter skies, but showers following into western parts and temperatures trending downwards. That downward trend continues on Saturday and Sunday, but for most it also turns drier and brighter.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Are we suffering from a mono-narrative in our discourse, whether it's about the environment, about the pandemic, or what's happening in Ukraine? Joseph says, great introduction, Mark. I agree with every word you've uttered tonight. That was so right, what you said about COVID mismanagement. We need to understand the other points of view to exit this unnecessary, tragic loss of lives. He's speaking there about the pandemic. Alan says, hi, Mark. Sean Bailey is spot on. Dialogue needed. China would be willing to broker. End of the day, money talked, says Alan. How about this? Leslie, good evening. Cannot believe I'm hearing this wonderful words from Mark Dolan. These are the greatest words I've heard from broadcast media in my lifetime. That's very kind, and I'm sure not true, but thank you, Leslie. At last, someone who's willing to speak frankly and honestly about the mania infecting our thinking and calling for balanced and nuanced debates. And finally, Phil, who says, how's the phone? Phil, it's in one piece, unlike me. It's time now for The Clash. Those cases are worth the money. Yes, in The Clash, we tackle a major news story of the day from opposing points of view. It's been reported in the course of the pandemic that pressure from teaching unions was a major factor in school closures and ongoing mask mandates for kids as young as 11 in the classroom. Unions have pushed for work from home orders and myriad other COVID measures on behalf of their members, in some cases where the scientific case was debatable. Meanwhile, students who have been through hell with lectures on Zoom had to deal with a university strike last month, and now London is in chaos as tube workers down tools over pay and conditions. Public outrage around these strikes is growing, with GB News presenter Isabel Oakeshott pointing out the following. She tweeted, "The average tube driver earns £56,000 for a 36-hour week plus bonuses, and they get 43 days annual leave. No wonder they leave." Today, they're bringing misery to millions of Londoners by going on strike to demand an even better deal. Change the law and fire the lot of them. So, are trade unions important representative bodies protecting the rights, pay and conditions of their members, or are they a divisive threat to businesses and the wider economy? Quite simply, here's the question. Are the unions destroying Britain? Send me your thoughts, mark at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews on Twitter, and I'll bring you the poll results shortly. But to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former London Mayor Ken Livingstone and Robert Olds, director of the Bruges Group, which is a group dedicated to the memory and political philosophy of Margaret Thatcher. Robert Olds, are the unions destroying Britain?
Absolutely. The unions have absolutely also undermined workers' rights. They have actually damaged the interest of working people in this country. They've supported the European Union, they've supported mass immigration, supported climate change policies which have ramped up our energy costs. They supported the lockdowns, as you mentioned, which destroyed so many jobs. The unions, the established trade unions, are indeed woke. They're part of the establishment, and they're not really anymore about defending workers' rights. In fact, there's only been one union in this country that's actually been defending those who have been threatened with dismissal for not being vaccinated or for objecting to the lockdown. And there's that one union is the Workers of England Union and Workers of Scotland Union, and they're the only unions that have actually been fighting for people's rights, whereas the establishment unions have just been going along with whatever government policy has been emerging, and they actually supporting policies that have harmed the least well-off in our society.
Ken Livingstone?
I completely disagree with that. All my life, trade unions have defended the rights of ordinary people, fought to get decent wage increase each year. As soon as I started work, I joined a trade union, and I'm still in the T&G union. I mean, literally, I think trade unions have done more than any political party to actually improve the quality of life for the mass majority of our population.
Except with inflation out of control now, Ken, surely the last thing we need is a lot of pay rises in the public sector. I mean, what is it about £50,000 a year for a 36-hour week that tube drivers don't like?
Yeah, but there aren't many workers earning that sort of money. The simple fact is that this level of inflation means that most people are seeing their real income go down year by year. And we've got to tackle inflation.
Yes, but if you have pay rises in the public sector, that pushes inflation up, Ken.
Yeah, no, it doesn't put inflation up.
Of course it does. That's what pay rises do. Pay rises are inflationary.
Literally, we need to actually ensure that people that work in the public sector and the private sector are getting a decent wage increase each year, which matches the level of inflation. And inflation is higher than the vast majority of wage increases. But Ken,
that's like quicksand. That's 70s economics. I mean, we'll be bankrupt, within a generation if we do that.
Yes, but we're not in the mess we're in today because of trade unions. We're in the mess we're in today because we've got appalling government.
Well, there's another point. Are we in the mess today because of the trade unions? Because it was reported widely that school closures were as a result of union pressure, and in fact, stay-at-home orders as well is something that trade unions were very firmly behind.
Our problem is that we have nothing like the level of investment in our economy that we used to have. And that's our problem. We need to see that private and public investment is matching the changes we need to see to keep our economy equal to major competitors like France and Germany.
But Ken,
we're badly behind them.
It's not investment, is it? It's borrowed billions.
No, it's you borrow money to invest, the economy grows, and you generate wealth, you can pay back the debt.
What about investing in our own
Robert,
people, Ken?
help me
We
out.
have the trade unions that support almost unlimited immigration into the UK, the supported European Union membership, which brought more immigration in, and that lowered the wages for the least well-off. It added more demands onto our public services. It meant our young people would emerge from school or university and wouldn't necessarily be able to find a good job because there's a massive pool of people that a company could draw from. Indeed, they could just find an app, indeed, and get a load of workers in at a lower rate than what would otherwise be expected to pay. The mass immigration harmed the interests of the least well-off, and the unions supported it because they're part of the establishment. The unions may well have had a good role to play in the past with collective bargaining, with making sure that workers got a better deal, but those times have changed, they have gone, and we need to move on with that. There is a role for some unions that will actually stand up for workers' rights where they exist. But the established trade unions that just support the line from the government, that support the European Union, support mass immigration, support these climate change policies, and worst of all, supported the lockdowns, closing schools and even universities being closed, damaging the life chances of our young people. A lot of that came from pressure from the trade unions that are more about their woke ideology rather than actually fighting for their individual members' rights.
Well, yes, Ken, the teaching unions seem to care mainly about the welfare of their teachers, not the children. Will you accept now that it was morally wrong and also intellectually stupid to close schools in the first place during this pandemic?
I think it was, actually. But let's look at the reality. I mean, when the post-war Labour government encouraged people to come to Britain as immigrants from the Caribbean, it was because we didn't have enough people here to fill up all the jobs. I remember, literally there weren't enough bus conductors, and therefore people came in from Jamaica, they filled up those jobs. And it's also the same in many other areas. We haven't got enough doctors and nurses. That's what drives immigration.
We have too much pressure on our social services because there's so much immigration. The system just cannot cope. What we need to do, we have pressure on housing. What's driving up housing costs in this country? It's about supply and demand. Now, we need to defend workers' rights. Absolutely, there's a whole host of laws which should be applied and applied properly to give people a fair say at their work and make sure they're not harassed or discriminated against. But the established unions haven't been doing that. As I mentioned, the only union, as far as I know, that's defended people who faced the sack for not being jabbed or for criticising the lockdown was the Workers of England union. Other unions absolutely did not want to know when it came to care workers losing their jobs or the NHS nearly crippled by the government that was insisting that they be vaccinated. 73,000 doctors and nurses and other NHS workers could have left. It was only the Workers of England union, from what I know, that was actually defending those people who wanted to have their bodily autonomy and decide their own future rather than being told what to do by the government and the health secretary.
Well, I remember a different world from the one you're talking about, because all my life, unions have fought to improve the quality of life for people, all people, but to build more housing, create more jobs, improve education. Our trade unions have been a constant force for improving the quality of life.
Apart from when they wrecked the economy in the late 1970s, we had so many strikes in the winter of discontent that bodies weren't being buried, Ken. Margaret Thatcher was elected on a campaign slogan which was, "Who runs Britain? The unions or the government?" You must admit, at that point in their history, they were out of control. Margaret Thatcher cracked down on the unions, which is what led to 3 consecutive landslide wins.
Now, I don't agree with you. The simple fact is, when we got to 1974, Saudi Arabia quadrupled the price of oil and triggered a global recession. I mean, millions of people all over the world lost their jobs. That triggered strikes and things like that. But the unions were fighting to defend the quality of life for ordinary people. It was Saudi Arabia, not the trade unions, that caused that crisis.
Well, it didn't help when teachers were on strike to support the miners and the grave diggers were on strike. The dead couldn't be buried, rubbish couldn't be collected because there was rampant extremist trade unions with political agendas. And unfortunately, many of the largest trade unions have political agendas again. It's just the corporate political agenda that they now follow. Often they're just a tool for management. They're embedded in many councils, in many corporations, and they will just do as management says. They are part of the system now, and they're not actually fighting for workers' rights. They're fighting for their ideology. Before it was may have been a socialist or ideology and supporting labour and supporting workers' rights where they could and making sure they got better pay. Now it seems they've sold out to the woke establishment.
Well, look, when I was the leader of the Greater London Council back in the 80s, and then when I was mayor at the beginning of this decade, I had no trouble negotiating with unions. You sit down...
That's because they were on your side. They were all your mates, Ken.
Yes, and I wanted to see their life improve.
You did the deal. You've done a lot of the deals with the RMT, which has inflated the costs of the London Underground to a massive level. And now the London Underground is possibly facing bankruptcy because they wouldn't work. We were locked down in London during the pandemic. And now that the extensions that are needed are not happening, they've bankrupted the system under Mayor Khan. It's a dreadful financial situation, and paying tube drivers more than airline pilots is just obscene.
Particularly, Ken, look, when I cut the fares on the bus and the tube, there was a massive increase in customers coming on. The number of people travelling on the bus went up 100%. And you've got to cut the fares, and that's not...
when your buses work.
But the problem is, Ken, it's the unions and the opposition, the government as well, admittedly, most of the media, who have been pushing for these ruinous lockdowns, which have cost the economy £500 billion. The money just isn't there, especially to pay £2 a year for a 36-hour week. I mean, going back to that story, Ken, that strike, the tube strike, is not justified at the tail end of the biggest recession in 300 years.
We need to show that London and Britain has got back to working again and that we are open and ready for business. It's been terrible during these last 2 years. We're told it's just 2 weeks. It's been 2 years. And then just as we're coming out the pandemic, just as the government has announced there's going to be no more of these ridiculous rules that aren't needed, London Underground goes on strike, the city grinds to a halt. That sends out completely the wrong message. It's not what we need, and it's actually damaging the interests. They might be able to get a good pay rise for those who belong to the RMT, but every single worker in London that needed to get to work that day and had their day ruined, their interests are not being looked after.
The problem with our economy is not the trade unions, but government that hasn't done enough to get the investment we need to keep our economy growing strong.
OK, I mean, briefly, Robert, just to say in mitigation that if you had your way, you and your pals at the Bruges Group, Britain would be like Dickensian London, wouldn't it?
No, what we have some excellent laws that defend workers' rights, that defend people from harassment and discrimination and stop them being pushed around by management. What we have now is a growth of new trade unions that are growing and establishing themselves. This is something which is happening in America and in the United Kingdom as well. And as I mentioned, an organisation such as the Workers of England Union, that went from being a relatively small union to taking on many, many thousands of workers because it was so active in keeping our NHS going and stopping the government ruining our health service by making sure everybody vaccinated.
If you had your way, there'd be no rights, 0 hours contracts, minimum wage, life would be miserable for the working people of this country.
There would be rights, and it would be enforced not by unions which go on strike and ruin people's lives. It would be by unions fighting hard for their members and making sure they're not bullied and harassed. And what would be the best thing for workers and the best thing for young people who need to find a home and need to get a mortgage and get on the housing ladder would be to control immigration properly, and so we then invest in our young people and we give people a decent salary, because the worst thing that's happened to working people in this country, and it's absolutely proven, the numbers are in, is that the mass immigration has lowered wages for the least well off, but of course it's benefited the super rich, and benefited the woke establishment who just love to undermine our national identity.
Except, Robert, that high immigration is linked to economic growth. But look, it's all about opinions. It's all about debate. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. London Mayor Ken Livingstone and Robert Olds, director of the Bruges Group. A fascinating conversation. What do you think? Duncan on Twitter says the unions are always playing politics, be it education or transport, like with the London tube strikes. They couldn't care less about the damage caused. Elliot on Twitter says good unions have always represented their workers responsibly and well, thereby making life better all round. Bad unions use their strength irresponsibly, wreaking havoc and destroying jobs. We need the good. We can do without the bad. And Trevor on email. Trevor, thanks for your email. Unions were appropriate back in the days when we were sending young children up the chimneys. Today they are redundant and have evolved. They have evolved into a mafia. And your verdict is now in. In our text poll, 90% of you, 90%, agree that the unions are damaging Britain. 10% disagree. But a really great debate. Thank you so much to Robert and Ken for that one. Coming up, we'll speak to two Ukrainians in the middle of Europe's war zone. Inna Sobson, the former education minister who's schooling Russian invaders on what bravery really looks like. And we're going to speak to Ukraine's Eurovision contestant determined to make Putin face the music. But next, as Camilla is moved to tears by what's happening in Ukraine, we'll talk royal news with Robert Jobson in Crown Jewels.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Regarding trade unions, Highmark says, Tim, trade union power in terms of your topic there, the problem is that they largely represent the public sector. What about the private sector? Private sector workers are lucky to have a job, and even if they have, they often don't get any pay increases. Tim, thank you so much for that. Keep the emails coming in, mark@gbnews.uk. Now, breaking tonight, Prince Charles and Camilla have paid an emotional tribute to those whose lives have been turned upside down or stolen altogether in the war in Europe, following their visit to London's Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral this afternoon.
My wife and I have been deeply moved by everything we've heard today during our visit, and above all by the extraordinary bravery, generosity and fortitude of the Ukrainian community in the face of such truly terrible aggression.
Well, Camilla was left close to tears as the Ukrainian community sang a mournful song about their homeland. It's very unusual for royals to share their opinions and feelings on political issues, perhaps showing how distressing the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been for the Duchess of Cornwall. Well, the royal editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Jobson, joins me now. Robert, Prince Charles has chosen incredibly strong words on this, but should he have kept his feelings to himself?
Oh, I don't think so. I think these are extraordinary times, and I think if the Prince of Wales, whilst a visit to the Ukrainian cathedral, how can you keep your opinions to yourself? We're watching democracy being completely under threat in Ukraine, and the way that the rule of law and our way of life under threat. And I think for him to remain silent would be ludicrous. After all, this is the same guy that said in 2014 that he compared Putin to Hitler over the takeover of the Crimea at the time. He was told to shut up and not say these things. Perhaps if a few more people would listen, we might have done something about it.
Yeah, too right. Now, although Dan Wootton is away on his holidays, a well-deserved break, Robert, he's still bringing us royal exclusives. He's told the Mail Online, in his fantastic column, of course, of a secret palace push for the Duchess of Cambridge to become the new star of the royal family. Could she be the new Diana?
Well, I mean, she'd be very keen to avoid that comparison. I think we had all those comparisons, didn't we, at the engagement when I think that William said that she'll find her own way. And I think she has. I mean, there's no doubt, though, that as she's entered her 14th year, she's far more confident than she was. She speaks very eloquently. She's fantastic. On a recent visit, I went with her to Copenhagen, where she was following through her program for early learning and early child development, and she was on top form. Really, actually a bit more relaxed even than when she's with Prince William. So I think she's certainly got the ability to be a new star, and one day, of course, she will take that title that was made famous by Diana, the Princess Diana, Princess of Wales as we know her, but of course is the title for the wife of the Prince of Wales, the heir to the throne, when that happens. So, it'll be a different time, a different style, but I do believe that she's got so much to offer, and is certainly on top form. Yeah, and absolutely, Dan's right, she is the rising star of the family.
Too right. Robert will catch up in a week's time. Thank you so much for joining us. A really busy hour and 10 minutes to come. Do MPs deserve a pay rise as ordinary Brits face a cost of living crisis? They must have a good union because they're getting a big bump in their pay packet. I'll be debating that with my superstar panel in the Media Buzz after 10. But next, we get the latest from brave Ukrainians on the ground. The country's Eurovision contestant will be joining us, determined to make Putin face the music. We'll also speak to the former education minister who is schooling Russian invaders on what bravery really looks like by taking up arms to defend Kiev. So much to get through. I'll see you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'll get to more of your emails shortly. Mark at gbnews.uk. My big opinion monologue can be found on our Twitter feed right now at GB News. Have a look and tell me what you think if you missed it first time round. But joining me now is Ukrainian MP Inna Sovsun, who was Deputy Minister of Education, but who has now been given a gun and is there to help defend the capital. Inna, welcome to the show. We're just connecting to Inna very shortly. Thank you so much for joining us on GB News. Are you in possession of a weapon now, Inna?
I am, which is extremely strange for myself, because if someone told me a week ago I would own an assault rifle, I would not believe. But that is the new reality. I own an assault rifle, and I speak to you over there in the United Kingdom while sitting in the wardrobe at my friend's place, because we cannot turn on the lights, so the wardrobe is the only place I can actually show my face and turn on the lights.
Absolutely shocking. And can I ask you, do you know how to use this weapon that you've been given?
You know, my boyfriend has been promising to teach me for so long, and I was always saying, like, I'm not going to need that. So, well, I know the theory, but I'm a university professor by background, so I wasn't really trained to do so. So I really hope I will continue fighting on this information war. I think that I'm much more skilled to do that. But in case it needs be, I don't have anywhere else to go. This is my city. This is my land. I have to protect it, just like thousands of Ukrainians are doing right now. Just like my boyfriend is, he is with the army. My dad joined the territorial defense. So just like thousands of other Ukrainians, it is part of my job, and it is just being a citizen in Ukraine right now means that we are protecting our country.
Do you think that Vladimir Putin underestimated the courage and spirit of the Ukrainian people?
Oh, so much. I think that Vladimir Putin underestimated the very idea of Ukraine, because he was thinking that he will be fighting the Ukrainian army. But in fact, he is fighting the whole of Ukrainian people. So we are actually overwhelming in numbers. We are seeing those reports from different parts of the cities where people are seeing Russian tanks, and instead of just surrendering, instead of stepping back, they're taking the guns and shooting at the Russians. They are preparing Molotov cocktails and throwing them at Russian tanks. The most amazing things happened in several towns. I've seen the videos over there, where people whose town was invaded by Russian soldiers, they did the most Ukrainian thing possible. They went to the main square to protest against them and actually managed to kick them out of the country. So all of that is extremely helpful in terms of for the Ukrainian army to fight the Russians, because Ukrainian army has all the support. They have so much information from the citizens who are informing the army about the movements of the Russian troops. And with that is why the Russian plan of invading the city of Kyiv within 24 hours after the first bombardment of the city have actually failed. They didn't get into the city, except for the multiple groups of infiltrators who to a large extent have been destroyed. So they didn't manage to get into the city of Kyiv. So now they do try to do something, well, even more terrible with my native city of Kharkiv, which is on the eastern Ukraine, second biggest city in Ukraine. And I just want the whole world to know right now that what they're doing to Kharkiv right now is just terrible. They're bombing it from the sky. Almost every 2 hours we do hear about the new hit in the city center, in the living areas. I've seen a bomb explode like 5 minutes from my school. I've seen Putin bombing the area where I grew up. So yeah, that is in Kharkiv, and that is just unbelievable. This is a city in peaceful Europe in 2022. So that is what pains me to see. So compared to what we are seeing over there in Kharkiv, the situation in Kyiv is pretty stable. But I'm also getting so many messages from people back in Kharkiv. I'm getting messages from my former classmates whom I haven't talked to for 17 years. And they're all sending the same message. They're all saying, Please, we are staying strong. Just protect our city. We shall be hiding in bunkers as long as the Ukrainian army is protecting the city. But we want Putin to be punished. We want this fascist out of our country. That is the message that people of Kharkiv are sending, and well, to me and to the world in general. And because the people over there and the army is so strong, even after those heavy bombings that you are seeing, they didn't get into the city center on tanks. They didn't manage to get into the city center on tanks, even after those heavy bombings that you are seeing on video right now.
Would you like to see a no-fly zone enforced over Ukraine?
Oh, so much. Do you see what they are doing to our cities? That is unbelievable. There is no way we can protect against that ourselves. We are asking for no-fly zone. I know the whole large debate around this issue, claiming that this would involve NATO into the conflict. But let's be honest about that. Let's imagine the worst-case scenario that Russia does override, that they take over Ukraine, they destroy it, and then they come to the Polish border. And they already have claimed that they really don't like Poland in NATO. They don't like Hungary in NATO. They do have issues with Finland. We did get the report from the Swedish Minister of Defense claiming that the Russian planes were flying over the Swedish territory. At some point, NATO countries will have to step up. The question is just after how many casualties they will step up. That is why we are asking for no-fly zone. I know it's a contested issue, but look at what they're doing. It's not about politics. It's about human decency and protecting the human lives. I've seen this terrible report from, again, native city of Kharkiv, where twins were born yesterday. They were born in a bunker during the bombardment. And today, both of their parents were killed in another bombardment. So please think about those two twins who were left orphans. First day of their life. Because, well, Putin has gone crazy and he's just bombing the cities here in Ukraine. Please remember about that when thinking about the no-fly zone of Ukraine.
We only have a couple of seconds left. We obviously pray for peace. We pray for an end to this. How do you see this playing out? What do you think the timeline could be, and what do you think the end result will be?
I think that really depends on the reaction of the West. The tougher the sanctions, full trade embargo is what we're asking for, no-fly zone is what we're asking for, more support to Ukrainian army. We are grateful to the UK for what you have given us so far, truly helpful to the Ukrainian army, but we need more. So that really depends on how long this war will last. Really depends on the Western support of Ukraine.
Inna Sovson, I'm humbled by your courage and that of the Ukrainian people. We wish you well, and thank you so much for joining us on GB News. I hope we get to speak again in the near future, perhaps under more positive circumstances. Ukrainian MP
so
Inna Sovson. Thank you very much, Inna.
Thank you.
It's 10:01. This is Mark Dolan on Dan Wootton tonight. I'm here in the hot seat tonight and tomorrow night and Monday and Tuesday as well, while the big man takes a well-deserved break. Speaking of breaking news tonight, as the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly demands an end to the Russian invasion, and both aisles of the Commons unite for a standing ovation for the Ukrainian ambassador. Why are key figures on both the left and the right seemingly drifting towards Team Putin? Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle is uncancelled at 10:40. Before that, do those MPs we just saw deserve a pay rise amid a cost of living crisis hitting the pockets of the Brits they were elected to serve? In just a few moments, I'll put that to my superstar panel of Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, Conservative politician Sean Bailey, and political commentator Daisy McAndrew. Also, are danger to life alerts sent directly to your phone a vital innovation, or Project Fear more portable than ever? I'll explore that and more in our Media Buzz at 10:30. Plus, I'll also bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspapers throughout the hour. And I'll be crowning today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before the end of the show. But first, here are the headlines with Miranda Shunker.
Thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Some developing news in the last hour. The mayor of Kherson, a city in the south of Ukraine, says Russian soldiers have forced their way into the city's council building. The mayor has urged Russian troops to not shoot at civilians and called on residents to not leave their homes at night time. Earlier, Ukraine's government denied reports Kherson had fallen into Russian hands, which would be the first sizable city to do so since the invasion began last week. Well, more than 2,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since the start of the invasion, according to the country's emergency services. Transport hubs, hospitals, children's nurseries and many homes have been destroyed. The World Health Organization fears an imminent shortage of oxygen, cancer medicines and insulin. But President Volodymyr Zelensky says resistance has been strong and believes Russia has lost close to 6,000 troops.
Just think about this figure, 6,000. To receive what? To receive Ukraine? It is impossible. It will not happen with rockets. It will not happen with bombs, tanks, any strikes. We are on our land, and there will be an international tribunal to prosecute them for the war against us.
Most of the world's countries have stood together against Moscow in the United Nations to demand it withdraws its soldiers from Ukraine. In a rare emergency meeting of the General Assembly, 141 countries voted for Russia to stop its offensive immediately. 35 countries abstained and 5 countries voted against it, including Russia, Syria and Belarus. Earlier in the Commons, Prime Minister Boris Johnson accused Vladimir Putin of committing war crimes in Ukraine.
Putin has gravely miscalculated. In his abhorrent assault on a sovereign nation, he has underestimated the extraordinary fortitude of the Ukrainian people and the unity and resolve of the free world in standing up to his barbarism.
Well, meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis continues to grow. The UN's refugee agency says more than 874,000 people have now fled Ukraine to neighbouring countries since the conflict began. And Roman Abramovich says he's decided to sell Chelsea Football Club days after the threat of sanctions was raised in Parliament. The Russian billionaire who bought it in 2003 says he'll be setting up a charitable foundation for war victims of Ukraine, where the net proceeds of the sale will be donated. He will also not be asking for the loans he made to Chelsea be repaid. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight with Mark Dolan.
Bill in Glasgow. Hi, Mark. What an interview with Ukrainian MP. This cretin Putin needs to be stopped. I hope he gets the same treatment as Gaddafi. Adrian says, dear Mark, loved your interview with Inna. These very brave people, they don't deserve any of this. A lovely country with lovely people. Why? Also, how about this from David? Dear Mark, you're right. The mono dialogue here is that Putin is evil and bad. Unfortunately, the mono dialogue in Russia for the last 8 years has been that Ukraine is corrupt and decadent, and the current invasion is justified after the pro-Russian government was overthrown by a pro-EU movement. Dave, thank you for that. We'll get some more of your opinions very shortly. Tomorrow's News Tonight in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at the front pages hot off the press. As you can guess, there's only one story in town. Let's start with the eye, shall we? Welcome to hell. Babies are being born on the floor of air raid shelters as Vladimir Putin intensifies Russian bombings of civilians, with Ukraine's next generation facing a frightening future. Metro, their finest hour, a week on from Russia's invasion, Ukraine still stands. And The Guardian, Russia wants to erase us, warns Ukraine's President. Zelensky pleads for help amid mass exodus and dire warnings of growing humanitarian disaster. Shocking stuff. Well, my superstar panel are back with me. Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platell, former Conservative London Mayor candidate Sean Bailey, and political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Now, in a controversial move, MPs, here's the surprise, are to get a pay rise. of £2,212 from next month for working harder during the pandemic. I kid you not. The announcement has sparked a furious backlash, with the change coming as Brits are clobbered by a national insurance hike and a growing cost of living crisis. I got a letter from my gas supplier today saying that my bill will be 55% higher. Wow. Now, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, who set MPs' pay, said the rise is the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. But both Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer urged them not to go through with the increase. Well, it seems that money can't solve every problem. In the wee hours of yesterday morning, Labour's MP for Walthamstow, Stella Creasy, who previously spoke out about being reprimanded for bringing her baby into the Commons, took to Twitter, posting the following: "Me and Kid 2 finally leaving Parliament after the votes for the policing bill went on until 1 a.m. Tell me again this system is family friendly." To which radio host and a good friend of mine, Julia Hartley-Brewer, replied, "Breaking, woman paid £82,000 a year, brackets, even while on maternity leave, is unable to organise a babysitter. Also, maybe you could ask your baby's dad to step up every now and then. Most parents manage to work and have kids without whinging about it every bloody day." Classic Hartley-Brewer. So, panel, should MPs be getting a pay rise? Let's start with that, Amanda. Do they deserve more cash?
No, they certainly don't, and not at this time. I mean, you know, what is your bill? Your bill's gone up by what, 50 quid?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah?
Extra couple of cheese sandwiches.
Okay. So, but everyone is hurting at the moment. Everyone, and we know it's going to get worse because of the repercussions for the fuel supply over the situation in Ukraine. But this is, you know, it's tin-eared. To their credit, both Boris and Starmer said we should not be taking this. It's an independent body that attributed it.
Yeah.
What I would like to see, a number of MPs have said that they will not take the pay rise. I would like to see them donating it to the Red Cross. And let's name and shame the ones who do and the ones who don't.
However, isn't every MP effectively the CEO of their constituency, responsible for the welfare? Okay,
I'm sorry. You haven't been in politics as long as I have.
Responsible.
That's a real stretch.
Stick with me on this.
They told me you're a comedian. I get it now.
But on this one, I'm deadly serious. I mean, up to 100,000 people are in every constituency in the country. That's a lot of lives, and whoever the MP is has a big sort of stake in the welfare of those people.
There is no audit of the work they do. There are some MPs who are brilliant constituency MPs who work day and night. There are a lot of them who work 4 days a week, and that is it. I mean, honestly, I mean,
That's 100%
Sean, you know
right.
more about this than I do.
No, Sean doesn't want to go into Parliament because he can't afford it, because he can't live off 80 grand a year. Not with those suits.
Because
I've got to say, most people wouldn't give an MP a pay rise at the best of times. Right just now, with this cost of living crisis coming down the pipe, it's wrong. Both Keir Starmer and Boris have said as much.
Yeah,
but the bigger question here is about pay rises across the public sector. Now, what's happened is there's lots of people in the public sector who do not earn a lot of money. But there's a significant chunk who earn stacks of money, more than MPs, who've had this pay rise. That's a conversation we have to have.
The likes of NHS middle managers on six-figure salaries.
Yes, because what we've done, what the public sector have done, is hide behind the fact that if you're a teacher, junior teacher, a police officer, if you're I don't know, an orderly in a hospital, you earn very little, and they've sort of pushed that to the fore. But there's people who run councils who are hidden in Whitehall who earn oodles of money, who've already had this pay rise. That's what we need to look at, because there's no respect for the bill payer. The people of this country have suffered for years, and working people in particular have had no pay rise until they voted for Brexit. So I think we need to look at it in a round, not just in the case of MPs.
I realise pay rises, Daisy, are a hard sell at this moment in time, off the back of the pandemic. But I've always thought that our MPs are underpaid, and if you paid MPs properly, and I would suggest £150,000 a year.
Wow.
And I would recommend the Prime Minister at least £500,000 a year, and that would pay for Boris's wallpaper. Then you'll get a better quality of candidate, because there are lots of people watching this show. Well, you're going to agree?
I completely agree, and I always have agreed. It's a horrible cliche, but you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, and that is
We've
what
got so many monkeys.
That is what happens in politics.
It's a jungle.
If you look at other countries like Japan or Singapore, where they pay massively more than us.
I think in Singapore it's $1 million a year. year.
The creme de la creme don't go into banking, don't go into tech, don't become entrepreneurs, don't do all those. They go into politics because it's worth their while. And back in the day when the only MPs were landed gentry, aristocrats, they didn't need the money. It was, it was just pin money.
Yeah.
It was
Lord
totally
this
irrelevant.
and the Duke of that.
It was totally irrelevant. And it's not like that anymore. So I'm afraid you do get...
Daisy, what would you pay an MP then? What would you pay?
Double.
We're going to 150k.
I tell you why that's wrong. If you look at Parliament now...
Careful, you might be entering the House.
Hold on.
I'm fighting for you.
But there's a fair spread... Hold on. There's a fair spread of people. If you pay that big salary, all you will get is city types. You will be having
Why would a so-called normal person not want a big salary?
Hold on, hear me out. What will happen is you will get a monoculture of the highly successful, highly illiterate. What you want in Parliament is a spread of people who've had life experience. And I tell you something.
So pay them crap and you'll get a spread of experience.
Because the other thing...
No, Daisy, I think what he was saying, and Sean, I will overrule you in this one moment, please. If Daisy and I have both worked in politics and we are people of experience, may I say so, Daisy, even though you've had a lot less experience than me in terms of
you were about to say a lot of work.
No.
This guy was nearly London Mayor before the election was stolen.
Yes. No, but if we were offered 150k to work 4 days a week with a crate on site, it may tempt us back into the world of politics. And you would be denied our presence on your
You would only get you would get this monoculture of very highly motivated, very highly sort of successful people, when what you need in Parliament is a spread of life experience.
But Sean, the other thing that happens with a pretty crappy salary is that you get all the MPs doing their second jobs, so they're not really focused. You get corruption. Countries where it is pretty much a proven fact that the more you pay the MPs, the less they're likely to take cash for honours, or in other countries, whatever the backhanders might be. Places like Singapore have this amazing scheme whereby the brightest kids at school are basically paid scholarships.
I agree with everything Daisy said. I want to actually stand up and applaud.
The wickedest things in the world have been done by the supposedly brightest,
single thing
by the brightest people
I'm
in the world.
noting that.
It'll come.
No, I'm noting
I'm telling you.
We can but dream.
But Sean, I'm not talking about the kids in the posh.
But Sean, I've got
a
perfect example of why MPs are underpaid. The expenses scandal. The reason that happened, and you know as well as I do, and Daisy and Amanda, you'll back this up. The House of Commons authorities said to MPs, "Listen, we'll sign off your duck ponds and your flat screen tellies because you're underpaid and the public won't buy a pay rise, so you can just have more expenses." Now, in fairness to the Daily Telegraph, they exposed it, but really, I think the MPs were unnecessarily vilified because they were told, ignore the rules and put your expenses through.
Hold on.
That's true, isn't it? And why? Because they were underpaid.
I would take our level of corruption against almost any parliament in the world. And what you find about our parliament as well, people who can afford it, people who can't afford it, still want to be there. Paying them more would change the entire feel of the place.
Daisy.
You would get comments like Stella Creasy. She earns 82 grand a year and can't find a
And there's an on-site crate
about
in the
the
House of Commons.
expenses. One of the problems with the culture when expenses was going on is they all thought that it was owed to them. They had this, well, we're on such a rubbish salary, but, and they were all telling their chums, particularly, I'm afraid, in the Conservative Party, and I'm not saying that in a party political way, but they were sort of better at it. Dear boy, you've got a duck pond, you can put that through, blah, blah, blah. And there was just this extraordinary culture of that's what you could get away with because the salary was bad.
It was a workaround. It was a workaround. I feel for the MPs, really, that were vilified as a result.
I didn't feel for them, but because they brought it on themselves because they didn't have any self-awareness how bad it looked.
I just felt really jealous. I mean, I didn't even have a garden, let alone a duck.
I've long been jealous of the size of Lembit Opic's telly.
How big was it?
It's seeing is believing. An email from Dave who said, "Hi, Mark. MPs, pay them 150,000, no expenses." How about that, Dave?
Well, no expenses.
Sure.
Sean even.
If you're going to pay... Look,
it's his nickname.
Listen, the no expenses thing, I understand. But I am worried about the type of person you generate in Parliament. You'd be generating people who just live separate lives.
Well, what about... OK, Sean, hypothetically, what about somebody that runs a small business who thinks I could make a contribution to public life, but they look at 80 grand a year, they think about the size of their mortgage, they look at their credit card bills and their debts, and they think, I just couldn't afford to be an MP.
Yeah, you'll always find someone who can, because remember, the 82,000 we currently pay is significantly
But don't you
above
want someone
the
in the
average
house that
earning.
has set up a small business who perhaps has a salary of 100, 150 grand in the private sector, who looks at making a contribution to public life, but just thinks the salary is below 100k, I just couldn't do it.
But you don't want...
Don't you want those people in that comment?
But you don't want everybody being like that, because they have the same conversation. It becomes a mono conversation, to use your term.
Fair enough.
And they don't live
But
or have any experience how the rest of us live.
I still don't follow the logic of why... how much you're paid means what type of person goes into that job, because everybody would go into it for public, in theory and hopefully for public service, and you would still have different parties. So you'd still have the Labour Party or equivalent of blah, blah, who have different beliefs. So hopefully they would have different backgrounds, but it just means that people wouldn't rule themselves out of going into politics because of the lack of money.
Daisy, with all your experience in politics, and you're so eloquent and clearly so beautiful, have you not ever thought that you would have loved to have been an MP?
No, the minute I worked for a Conservative MP when I was 19 years old, I worked for a Liberal Democrat, there is no way I could do that life. It is really hard life, and I wanted to have another life.
There's no work-life balance, is there?
And actually, Stella Creasy's point, I completely... Now, working in the House of Commons was the most incredible privilege, and every day you're walking through Westminster Hall, you just get this tingle and think this place is so amazing.
That's great.
But there are elements of it that are stuck in the dark ages, and I'm sorry, you don't achieve anything by having your employees working at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but
it's outrageous that you would expect them to perform and then expect them to do something serious, like have a meeting with a constituent who's being abused by her husband or something like that at 9 o'clock the next morning, having had 5 hours.
But why is it the government's job, the state's job, to find a babysitter for Stella Creasy?
It isn't.
But there are two issues there. There's the baby issue, which I think was publicising it, but there's also, I don't want any of my MPs, whether they've got a baby or not in their arms, working at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Excuse me, we work until 1 o'clock.
Sean Bailey, Dave?
Dave Bailey.
Running the country,
My best mate.
is a 24-hour-a-day job. Things happen, votes need to get
Exactly.
That's the gig. That's the job.
The government agenda will always be packed. If you have to be there late, you have to be late. I've done shift work. There's people at home now who have 2 jobs to make.
Yes, but you can
including young mothers.
Hold on, single parents. My mum worked her butt off to get me and my brother through life. She's a single parent. She had more than one job at some point. She definitely wasn't earning 82 grand, and she made concessions.
But Sean, I'm saying it's not.
You turned out very well, so well done your mum.
It's not an efficient use of their time. I think they will be working late, but they could do proxy voting, they could do electronic voting, they could just modernise it and make them more efficient. Because of course they have to work round the clock, but they don't have to file through chambers, file through buildings to vote. It's stupid.
There's certain parts of the pomp that are needed, and I, as someone like all of us, who did a lot of work across Zoom and Teams and all the rest of it, don't want the world to be operating the way they should be in Parliament. We expect them there. We pay them good money. Get on and do the job. If you can't do it, you need to change jobs. £82,000 a year is enough for your household to find a...
Amanda, a brief word. My mate Hartley Brewer, has she got a point about Stella Creasy? Get over yourself?
I love Julia. She's just great. And she's absolutely right. You know, there's more than one person in this relationship. If not, just get childcare.
Stella
they're not on a Tesco stacker's wage.
Yeah. Stella Creasy's husband is in the military and was abroad. So that was a stupid point to make.
OK, well, there you go. It is all about opinions. Now, a mum who claims to have the biggest eyebrows in Britain says people threaten to report her to social services because of her statement look. Sammy Jo Haleford started using liquid eyeliner to make her brows bigger last year in a bid to stand out, and now they take up half of her forehead. Groucho Marx, eat your heart out. The 27-year-old mum, who has over 75,000 followers on TikTok, is proud of her bold look that doesn't conform to beauty standards and isn't about to be browbeaten by the haters.
No, this is not a joke. This is me. And I'm just nipping to the shop now to get some fags. Don't be jealous because you don't have brows like mine.
I can just sense her kids disowning her as we speak. But look, good luck to her. Why not? Do what you like with your eyebrows. There's worse crimes, including my dad's corduroy trousers. Now, coming up are emergency alerts on our phones, a warning of floods and fires. An interesting story this. You get an emergency alert on your phone telling you a flood or a fire is coming. Is it useful or is it Project Fear going mobile? My panel debates that at 10:30. And next, Who's going to point out to rabid Remainers that they've been deriding the same national pride that is now keeping the Ukrainian resistance going? Brendan O'Neill might just be the man. He lifts the lid on Ramona hypocrisy after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
More of your emails shortly, but Brendan O'Neill is tonight's outsider. Earlier in the show, I told you how I'm done with woke virtue signalling in response from the West to the conflict in Ukraine. And across social media, the gesture politics are well underway, with Twitter handles and bios filling up with Ukrainian flags. Now, like everyone else, I've been watching in awe as the people of Ukraine risk their lives to protect their national sovereignty. But isn't it curious how flag-waving patriotism is suddenly something universally admired? Let's not forget that in the aftermath of the EU referendum, the bitter Remainer elite have been mocking people in this country who wave Union Jacks and express their own national pride. But following Russia's invasion, it appears that even they have realised that national identity and solidarity are not to be vilified. Well, Spiked Online's chief political writer Brendan O'Neill is here to dissect this latest example of woke hypocrisy. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Mark.
So last week the flag was a bad thing, now it's a good thing. I'm trying to keep up.
Exactly. It's very hard to keep up. And as you've just outlined there, you know, for the past 6 years, we've lived with a Remainer chattering classes who have demonized national identity. They've described national sovereignty as being basically xenophobia. They've mocked everyone who waves the English flag or the UK flag. And now, lo and behold, with the crisis in Ukraine, they've discovered that actually those things are very important and they have real meaning. And there's a real hypocrisy to this, you know, from people who support the EU and from the EU itself. They're now talking about how important national sovereignty is in Ukraine. These are the people who have undermined national sovereignty, not only in the UK, but across Europe over the past few decades. So I'm glad they're finally discovering that national sovereignty is important. I wish they'd discovered it a bit sooner.
Yes, and what they need to do is discover it for this country, and they need to actually engage with the Union flag as well as the Saltire in Scotland and the other nations' flags.
I I think they need to discover national sovereignty for all nations, including this one. You're absolutely right. National sovereignty is one of the most important principles in international affairs. It's national sovereignty that protects a nation from external interference, which allows us to have democracy, which gives citizenship real meaning. That's why many of us voted for Brexit. It's not because we hate Europe. It's not because we want to stop all immigration. It's because we believe in nationhood and we believe in democracy, which is made possible by nationhood. And I think what the Ukraine war, what Russia's obscene invasion of Ukraine, it has brought these questions very much to the surface. The right of a nation to self-determination, that is a really important issue, and too many in our chattering classes have been undermining national self-determination. They can't now turn around and claim to be its key cheerleaders.
Well, yeah, so what are your thoughts about all of these celebrities coming out and virtue signalling about Ukraine? All of the tweets, all of the Instagram posts, even Labour's Jonathan Ashworth today, in a very sort of pompous photograph, signing his declaration of devotion to the people of Ukraine. Of course, I support the sentiment, but some of this makes me want to, I don't know, really question the motive.
There's something about it that is quite annoying. I mean, I fully understand why people want to support Ukraine. I think President Zelensky is a hero. I understand why people are really hero worshipping him at the moment, and the Ukrainian people who overnight have turned into resistance fighters. That is incredibly admirable. So I understand why people want to support them. But it seems like the only thing we ever do these days is signal our virtue on social media, put up a flag, make a comment, share a few memes or a few photographs. I wish there was something more we could do, something a bit more tangible, something more useful, something more practical. I don't like the way everything becomes about saying, I'm a good person because I have the following views, rather than thinking about real meaningful ways we can help people who are facing a terrible threat right now.
Now, clearly, what's happened is the illegal invasion, Brendan, of a sovereign free country, a European country. The scenes that are playing out on the news channels are truly distressing. They are horrific. I've got no doubt that war crimes are being committed as we speak. But do we need to have a more nuanced conversation about the background to this war?
I think we do. And one thing that worries me at the moment is the clampdown on anyone who wants to have that discussion. If you look at what's happening in the Labour Party, you basically will have the whip removed, and you might even be booted out if you dare to criticise NATO, or if you raise the prospect that NATO's eastward expansion may have contributed to the crisis in Ukraine and around that part of the world. Now, there's no mystery at all. Russia bears full responsibility for this criminal invasion, which I think, and it needs to be held to account, and it needs to be defeated in Ukraine. That is incredibly important. Russia is to blame for this current problem. But we do have to look at the role that the West has played in pushing NATO further eastwards, right up to Russia's borders, without taking into consideration what impact that would have on stability and peace. So we need a more rounded discussion about the role we may have played, while at the same time standing against Russia's invasion.
How do you see this conflict playing out, Brendan?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. My instinct at the moment is this is going to be a very long conflict. I mean, once Putin has thrown himself into the Ukraine, he can't just walk away. I think it's going to go on for a very long time. If Russia takes over Ukraine in some capacity, I think there'll be a guerrilla war, a long war of resistance. I think that we have to recognize the fact that the world has changed really dramatically in a short period of time. I think some of us in the West had lulled ourselves into a false sense of security. The idea that we lived in a happy, clappy, post-borders world, nationhood was meaningless, nationalism was dead, everything was fine. And I think this has reminded us that history is still very much alive. History is still very much unresolved on this continent, and we need to start being a bit more serious. I think we've become too flighty in the West, too shallow, too unwilling to stand up for our values, too woke, too wet. And I think something like this is really, I hope, will make us come to our senses and realize that the world is a serious place and we have a serious role to play in it.
I agree. I think we've been arrogant. I think we've been complacent, and we've been asleep at the wheel. Brendan, Spiked Online is always a cracking read. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in a week's time when Dan is back. There's Brendan O'Neill there, Spiked Online's chief political writer. So much more to come. Why are key figures on both the left and the right seemingly drifting towards Team Putin? Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle is uncancelled at 10:40, always unmissable. I think you'll agree. But next in our media buzz, are danger to life alerts sent directly to your phone a vital innovation or Project Fear made portable? See you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back, and let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. And here are the front pages. Let's start with the Telegraph. First city falls to Russians. Surrender of Kherson gives Putin key bridgehead. Their mission is to destroy us, says besieged Mariupol. Ukraine claims Black Sea Fleet will launch new strike. Meanwhile, Putin's commanders will be hunted down for war crimes, says Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary. The Daily Mirror next. For his sake, for his future, stop. A boy is born in a bomb shelter beneath Putin's murderous assault on Kiev. The Daily Star. Bloody Vlad, nuclear heroes. Brave defenders block road to nuke reactor as Putin poodle issues chilling nuclear threats. The Sun. Klierovsky, Abramovich flogs Chelsea in panic. MPs sanction threat to Putin crony. That's right, Roman Abramovich, the owner of Chelsea, has put the club up for sale and he's looking for $3 billion. The Times now. Putin lays waste to cities. Bombardment pulverises schools and hospitals. Civilian deaths pass 2,000 as Kharkiv and Mariupol are hit. The Daily Express. Born into conflict, no baby should face a future without hope. Stop this evil. Even Putin's soldiers don't want war. The Independent. Civilian deaths soar as forces bombard key cities. And a truly shocking photograph on the front of the Independent. Soldiers removed the body of a victim of a rocket attack on Kiev yesterday as Russia steps up its campaign. Truly chilling stuff. And last but not least, Amanda's paper, The Mail. Camilla's anguished tears for Ukraine as Putin is accused of full-scale genocide after devastating new blitz. Duchess makes substantial donation to the Mail's refugee appeal. And those are your front pages. More on the media buzz with my amazing panel. Daily Mail columnist and broadcaster Amanda Platel, former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and political and royal commentator Daisy McAndrew. Let's just take a look at that Browse story. This is a mum on TikTok who's received a few haters because of her rather hefty eyebrows. So have you experienced an embarrassing mum or an embarrassing dad? How about my panel? Amanda?
Where do we start? Worst one, Dad. I had this boyfriend called Derek. He was a surfer. He was really cute. I really liked him. He used to throw stones at my bedroom window, hit them at Mum and Dad's bedroom window. Dad chased him down the street with a shotgun. And it was loaded.
Well,
it was Australia, and that was legal.
He was protecting...
But I did not have another date for about 3 years.
Oh, dear. He was protecting your honour. And I'm told you're still a virgin to this day. So his work was not wasted. So did this boyfriend throw stones at the wrong window?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
He was sort of trying to do that really romantic thing, the little pebble.
Yeah.
Dad's a light sleeper.
No, not a good look. And he got a bullet in return. How about you, Sean? Any embarrassing? Are you sure?
He just shot in the bushes.
You didn't see him again for 3 years, so you didn't see another boyfriend. Well, look, there you go. Brave man that turns up to your house. How about you, Sean?
Take that back.
My mum is super proud of everything I do, and when I was young, I did gymnastics for a very long time.
I've heard you're bendy.
Yeah, no, I used to be. And we was at a very serious competition. We were performing at Wembley, and my mum stood up at the top of her voice. Everybody began to shout, "Go on, Sean!"
That's amazing.
And it was amazing afterwards. It wasn't amazing at the time.
I think that's lovely.
Yeah, but for years after that, all of my teammates, at anything I did, would say, "Go on, Sean!"
At least they didn't say, "Go on, Paul," or whatever you called him.
Dave, that can be your nickname.
Sean, I have to ask, what was your speciality? Did you do the pommel horsey thing, or did you do...
At tumbling, floor was my thing. I liked a bit of gym. Did it for 22 years.
That's amazing.
How about the McAndrews?
Well, Sampson's as I was.
Of course.
Again, I think like most of us, if you're lucky, you only have one embarrassing parent, and mine was definitely my dad. He was an antique dealer, and prided himself on haggling, and would haggle everywhere. And I mean, in Harrods, he haggled in front of me when I was a teenager, and it worked. He haggled in everywhere, Dixon's, Curry's, everywhere. And he'd complain every restaurant, sending things back. You know, waiter, this is not very nice, blah, blah, blah. It was just like, oh, Dad, please stop, please stop.
I love it. There's the old Jewish joke, isn't there, which is the Jewish mums running down the street going, "My son, the lawyer's been run over. My son, the lawyer's been run over." That's not embarrassing. That's just parental pride, isn't it? You could say the same for an Irish mother, of which I'm the very proud owner. After nearly 2 years of being told we could contract and spread a killer virus anytime we stepped outdoors, it's no surprise that the cotton wool culture ushered in by the pandemic is lingering way past the peak. Today I came across this distressing video of a 4-year-old girl being scolded and blocked from hugging Winnie the Pooh on a visit to Disneyland, showing that COVID hysteria is still very much alive, even in the happiest place on earth.
There's Pooh Bear! Oh, you can't go hug, you can't hug. Sorry, I didn't know she was gonna run up on him. Hi, Pooh!
Absolutely ridiculous. America has fallen. Now we're being conditioned to remain in a state of fear, even as the pandemic slides off the news agenda, with the introduction of personal danger to life alarms. That's right, a danger to life alarm. These warnings of emergencies ranging from fires to floods and storms to explosions will be sent directly to your phone in the form of loud siren-like notifications under a new government scheme that will begin early this year. So what do we think? Is this Project Fear, Daisy, or sensible precaution?
I think it's quite sensible. You don't have to obey it, do you? You don't have to do anything about it. And some people are so stupid that, they'll go climbing a mountain without checking the weather forecast, and then have to get, fire and rescue to send a helicopter to rescue them. So I think if we can avoid any stupid people doing stupid things by sending them alert on their phone, because everybody, particularly, and I hate to be generationalist, but particularly, let's say, the under 30s or the under 40s, do need to be spoon-fed quite a lot and spend their entire lives looking at their phones. So if we can use the technology to stop them being stupid or take...
But haven't we created this sort of risk-averse culture since the pandemic? Life is dangerous. Get on with it.
But a warning isn't the same as a lockdown. I mean, a warning is just.
But will this protocol be utilised by the government next time there's another respiratory virus? You'll get a message on your phone: stay home. The virus is in your area. Doesn't it sort of just, essentially create that infrastructure of fear?
Only if you want to be frightened by it. I mean, I just think if it's something like, if you're in the area, these areas are going to be flooded, or your house might get flooded, so put some sandbags out. Totally fair enough.
If Chris Whitty or Patrick Vallance get hold of this technology, they'll be tweeting us every 5 seconds, won't they?
The problem. Who gets to decide who's stupid and needs to have these messages? Is this the thin end of the wedge?
We'd have to go to everyone.
Yeah, but there's a huge difference between a warning and information. You may be, your house is in danger of being flooded. That's the kind of thing people want to know. But there's a difference when people are saying, you can't do this, you have to be careful about that. What you're training our young people to do is 2 important things. 1, not to believe they have any agency themselves, and 2, not to take a common sense approach to life. Things are risky. You can mitigate that risk. But if your phone blares at you every time there's a supposed risk, you will then walk into a different risk because you think, well, they take care of this, I just wait.
Well, it's like when Whitty and Vallance and Sage talk about future variants. It's like with this phone, people are going to be looking for the next alert, waiting for it.
Or not looking, that's the point.
But surely they could do something really serious. Like having had a very bad experience recently with a Tinder swindler, whom I neither slept with nor gave any money to. I would like...
Your dear dad wasn't around to protect you with his shotgun.
Where was Dad with his shotgun? Sadly, he died 2 years ago. That is not funny. You didn't do your research.
Your poor dad.
OK? That is so rubbish, isn't it?
No, your dear dad. But look, that's the point, though, isn't it?
You had, like, if there was an alert for all these scandal guys who go onto social media, if there was something useful in life... I mean,
but actually there are...
That would be a really good thing.
But also, haven't you just got the state wiping your arse for everything?
I just don't want them to send me anything. I don't want anyone unsolicited
Thank you very much.
to send me anything.
It was bad enough when Apple forced you to have a U2 album on your phone.
But presumably...
that was the beginning of big tech overreach.
You hate U2?
Well, that new album, definitely.
Yeah, but presumably one can opt out of these things.
Oh, how do you do that, Daisy? It takes you, like, hours.
Well, just like the NHS app. You didn't have to upload the NHS app.
But do you see what I mean about how it creates a culture of fear and the expectation of the next crisis?
Yeah, the important thing as well, what it does, is creep. So we've already had suggested it could be out there to stop swindlers. We've gone from floods to swindlers.
That was the joke, Dave.
But also, you're right, because, for example, protective barriers everywhere. You made a great point, which is if there are barriers everywhere, you're going to stop looking where you're going.
Exactly. You lose the development of agency. Life can be complicated, it can be tricky, it can be dangerous. How you mitigate that risk is by being alert. If your alerts come from somebody sat in Westminster, you're in big trouble.
I totally agree with you.
Who's going to be there to help our children develop?
I think it's a bit antediluvian not to want to adopt new technologies in ways that might be useful, and that people can choose.
Modern.
But people can choose to opt in or opt out.
That's what people say about you all the time.
Daisy, have you been got at by Mark Zuckerberg?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Have you had any WhatsApp messages from Nick Clegg by any chance? 'Cause do you not think this is the other concern, big tech overreach?
But it's not big tech. It's a local authority saying your house might be flooded. I think you're getting a bit overexcited.
But what happened to the days when we could seek out that information?
But that I did start off by saying people are stupid and they don't. And these things cost money. That's one of the things.
Just leave us alone. Don't send us anything. As far as I'm concerned, I don't want any emails from anyone.
Unless it's a hot man.
Yeah.
Who's genuinely wealthy and isn't trying to swindle you.
That's what we're looking for. Someone that satisfies Mr. Platel's high expectations for his dear daughter.
So he can't shoot them.
God bless him.
Okay.
But look, his legacy, his great work is with us today, and I'm sure he's very proud and smiling upon you as we speak. And there you go. Well, look, coming up, lots more awkwardness. And also, the crowning moment of the show as I coronate today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass based upon the selections of my amazing panel. But next, why are key figures on both the left and the right seemingly drifting towards Team Putin? Columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle explores in Uncancelled in a few seconds. But right now, let's see what's coming up tomorrow.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight with me, Mark Dolan. The latest on Ukraine with former British Army officer Adrian Hayes and intrepid British adventurer Miles Routledge.
My uncancelled guest is freedom of speech champion and rapper Zubi. We've also got my big opinion, in which I'll be setting out my views at the start of the show before we get to yours. We've also got the newspaper first editions, and in The Outsider, serving up some much-needed common sense, it's reality star and famous political spouse Christine Hamilton. Reacting to the big stories of the day will be my superstar panel, including Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, entrepreneur and campaigner Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Amy Nickel. That's Dan Wootton tonight, with me, Mark Dolan, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Brilliant stuff. We are live. It's live telly. Don't you just love it? I'm getting to that age now where I've got to take the specs off in order to read anything. 47, who knew? It's time now for Uncancelled. It is live, you see, I told you. We're going to do Uncancelled now, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Breaking tonight, Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister drew a standing ovation at the UN Human Rights Council this evening in a stark contrast to the walkout Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov received yesterday during his address. The international show of support came after earlier today Boris Johnson led MPs on both sides of the House in a rare standing ovation for the Ukrainian ambassador to the UK.
I want to welcome to our gallery the Ukraine ambassador.
You're right. However, out there in the real world, individuals on both the left and the right aren't quite so unequivocal in their support of the Ukrainian president, which, rightly or wrongly, has seen them accused of being on Team Putin. Well, let's speak to columnist extraordinaire and associate editor of The Spectator, Rod Liddle. Hi, Rod.
Hiya, how you doing?
I'm very well. Tell me about these people that you consider to be more or less on Team Putin.
Well, there's the 11 Labour MPs who signed the Stop the War declaration blaming NATO for the invasion of Ukraine. And they're on the left. And they're the lefties who are with Team Putin are lefties are pro-Putin for two reasons, basically. The first is that they have a kind of hangover from the Cold War where they were all Russophiles and believed that everything that Russia did was right and whatever we did was wrong. And as a corollary to that, they also think pretty much in perpetuity that whatever the West does is wrong. And you saw that when the Labour Party was led by Magic Grandpa, where it was simply the case that almost everything Britain did was something to be disgusted about, and support was given to every possible terrorist organisation which was anti-Western. So that's the left. And then there's the right, which seems, from my Facebook feed and from reading comments in newspapers and so on, to consist largely of slightly sclerotic, late middle-aged men who've got a kind of man crush on Vladimir Putin because of his attitudes towards such stuff as homosexuality, transgender issues, and so on. And as often happens in our politics in this country, there's a kind of horseshoe effect where the far right and the far left finally come together, and the rest of us are left in the middle. And it's worth saying this just as a kind of corrective to what Brendan was saying earlier, what Brendan O'Neill was saying earlier. Now, I agree with some of what Brendan was saying. There are things that we could have done to have prevented this particular outcome. The first and most obvious, and which Brendan didn't mention, is that we had a chance to get Russia into NATO back in the 1990s. We had many chances, beginning in 90, then in 91, then in 93. Even Putin asked if Russia could join in 2000.
America rejected and Britain rejected.
Yeah, rejected, I have to say, contemptuously as well. Russia was simply brushed off. That was a time when we could have neutralised the Russian threat. But where I totally disagree with Brendan is this suggestion that, which is the Putin line, and which I do hear more and more people on the right pushing, and on the left, which is that NATO is somehow to blame for this. Listen, Brendan, mate, you're a great man and a great writer. If NATO hadn't pushed east and invited the likes of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania to join it, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania would today be part of the very happy Putin family of Russia. There is not the slightest doubt about that. Putin wishes to enlarge Russia to pretty much what it was before the breakup of the Soviet Union. And Latvia particularly, but also Lithuania and Estonia, are very high on his list of countries he would rather like to have. And NATO's involvement with those countries offers no threat whatsoever to Russia unless Russia attacks those countries. And so I think there's quite a lot of non sequiturs going on both the right and the left about Putin.
But now we have to talk, don't we, Rod, about what to do next, because we can be united in our condemnation of what Putin is actually doing to civilians in Ukraine. Except that if you reject the idea of enforcing a no-fly zone based upon the fact that it would more or less start World War III, that places you in Team Putin. And that's wrong, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's wrong. I mean, there are a few things we have to do. I think we have to bully India. I think we have to bully Pakistan, because both countries, for their own self-serving reasons, have looked at this invasion, have looked at the tanks rolling into Ukraine, or Croatia, as Diane Abbott puts it, and have decided that there is nothing there to condemn. And I think, we need to put a little bit, we're putting pressure on Russia at the moment. We need to put a bit of pressure on those countries who, for various dark reasons, haven't been as condemnatory as they should. Now, oddly enough, I'd excuse China from that. Now, China is Russia's ally, but it has been far less supportive of Russia than many people would have suspected. But India and Pakistan, there is no excuse. And I found it sickening to see pictures of Imran Khan shaking hands with Vladimir Putin, having just signed a deal to import loads of wheat from the country.
Well said.
It is unforgivable.
Yeah, diluting the economic impact of Western sanctions. Rod, fascinating stuff. Love reading you in the Sunday Times, The Sun and The Spectator. Rod Liddle there, who returns in a week's time. Well, let's have a look now at our Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So I'm going to ask Amanda, Sean and Daisy to nominate, first of all, their Greatest Britain. Only got a few seconds for this. Amanda, who are you cheering on?
Okay, Kate and William going to Wales wearing Zelensky khaki. I thought it was pretty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Miles away.
No, I couldn't agree more. What a great nomination. Sean, how about you?
I've stretched the definition slightly to include Lomachenko and Vitaly Klitschko, the championship boxers basically returning to their motherland to fight for their country. I have great admiration for that.
And Daisy, how about you? Who are you bigging up?
Well, sticking with Sean's theme, I've gone for, you can see him there, the Ukrainian ambassador in the UK, who, as you were just mentioning, was given that very moving standing ovation. I take your point about virtue signalling, but of course this was trying to say to a man who was in the House of Commons, we're
Brilliant
with you.
Stuff. Ukrainian ambassador all the way. I'm back tomorrow at 9. Headliners is next.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Cloudy and damp for most of us overnight, but the extensive cloud cover will keep it frost-free. Then some brighter weather emerges on Thursday, either side of a slow-moving weather front, which is crossing the country as we speak. Another one following behind, catching up with it. So generally a cloudy and damp zone associated with these fronts, and that is widespread during the evening and overnight, even reaching Orkney, not quite as far as Shetland for the time being. Some breaks in the cloud developing for East Anglia in the southeast and also for Northern Ireland behind the second weather front. But in between, a lot of cloud and the rain turning more persistent for Western Scotland, North Wales, as well as the southwest and South Wales as we start off Thursday. A frost-free start for most, temperatures 7 to 9 Celsius at the crack of dawn. Then these two weather fronts I mentioned, they squeeze together and bring one coherent band of cloud and outbreaks of rain through central parts of the country. Sunny skies emerging for East Anglia in the southeast, 10 to 13 Celsius here, 8 to 10 where it's raining in the middle, and then something a little fresher for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, 8 or 9 Celsius with brighter skies and a few showers. Into Thursday night, and the cloud and rain very slowly edges east, so that by the end of the night it's into eastern England, eastern Scotland with snow over the Grampians. But clearer spells in western Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Touch of frost possible in places, most places frost-free as we start off Friday. And it's another gloomy start, another damp start for many, but this time it's eastern Scotland, northeast England into the Midlands and the southeast, most affected by the cloud and rain. Brighter skies, but showers following into western parts, and temperatures trending downwards. That downward trend continues on Saturday and Sunday, but for most it also turns drier and brighter.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.